Yeah, the story I was going to tell was just kind of about how, I guess just this all came to be and kind of how we started just my brand up again. And obviously we had started my podcast back in, it was actually a year ago, like December. We were just sitting at a pizza restaurant. We were all talking about how we should just have a podcast. Like we're getting to that age where we were, I don't know, getting bored and we had some extra free time. Like a lot of them were finishing up with school. So we wanted to try to do some sort of podcast or something like that. So we set it up and
Naturally, the move was to start a podcast.
yeah, obviously something every 20 something guy, at least the thought pops into their head at some point.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, we did it in my buddy's apartment we did that for probably 4 months, I would say, pretty consistently, like every week. We had a couple breaks here and there if it was like, I don't know, holiday weekend or something. But even then, like we were pretty consistent. And then after a lot of them graduated, like my buddies, we kind of took a break over the summer. And in the middle of all this, I'd kind of had some just personal stuff I was going through or just trying to work through just on what I was doing in life. I was very, I don't know, unmotivated. I just quit the career that I thought I was going to be in, just doing restaurants and stuff. And I was like, this isn't what I want to do anymore. Now I feel like I'm lost. I had all this time ahead of people where they're still going through college and I kind of knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then it just
How old
kinda,
were you at the time? I know it was recent for us, but like, how old are you?
I'm 23. So
You're 22.
yeah, I was 22, about to be 23. And yeah, I was just struggling through that. I'd started working in restaurants back when I was 18 in high school, really. And I always liked it. I went to college for business and for that kind of sole purpose, just like running my own business. And then I just didn't really see a whole lot of value in that and what I was learning and how I was learning, especially too with the classroom. And I was on fantasy football half the time during class, just not really focused on school or anything. I didn't really take it seriously either. And then, yeah, so I was just having this like realization that, I don't know, it wasn't what I wanted to do or whatever. And then I was driving to work one day and I'd kind of just really broken down and just been like to God, like, give me a sign, something. Like, I need something to do. Like, I don't know what I should be doing right now. Like,
Yeah.
what is it? And
What was it that took you to that breaking point? Like, I feel like there's usually a situation or scenario, a conversation, something that will trigger that thought process.
Yeah.
It isn't. I don't feel like people naturally just feel like they just have a moment of like epiphany, or they're like, this is it or this isn't it. But it's usually when they feel, I would say, that they've received or they're seeing like some sort of message in front of them that clicks with them, right? Can you remember, or do you know what it was for you that like actually made you, really question what it is that you were doing?
Yeah, I think, at that point, I feel like I mainly lost myself and just wasn't really sure what I was doing. And it was just kind of like repeated nights after night, just like wondering what to do. I was just kind of spending my days just kind of going through the motions and just really, like just breaking down. And I don't know, it was a lot of like relationship stuff
so mainly a relationship issue that made
it was like friends and girls too, just stuff like that kind of was just like, it was just at a tipping point and I was just like done with it. And I was tired of feeling that way. And I was just like, anything, like just show me something. And a little backtrack. At that point, I'd been looking at moving out of Boise.
Yeah.
And I was wanting to do something. I'd liked the Nashville, Tennessee was one of my hot spots. I'd also been looking at this city. It's in South Carolina. It's called Greenville. And in that moment when I was driving to work, a car drove by and the license plate, right as I said, like, show me something, anything. A car drove by with the license plate, South Carolina, and the city was Greenville on there. So then it all came to me. I was like, okay, that's what I need to do. Let's go there.
You're like, this car is the answer.
Yeah, that's the answer. Like, I asked for it and God put it right in front of my face that this car from Greenville, South Carolina happened to be driving by at that same point. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was the answer. And little did I know, it kind of led me down everything. But anyways, I wanted to see that city first before I wasn't just going to pack up and move. I wanted to go visit it. So that summer I'd planned a trip. I have two friends that live in Nashville, and Nashville is about 6-hour drive from Greenville. And it kind of lined up perfect. The NHL was doing one of their drafts. They had their draft in Nashville in the summer. And I was like, oh, what a perfect thing to do. Like it was on a Wednesday. So I went on Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, we went to Greenville just to look at it. Cause that's where me and my roommate had kind of been like, this is what I want to do. And he was down to do it too. Little did I know, like in that process, kind of lined everything else up. And when we went to the NHL draft, I had already had my mind set on Greenville, or just like, that's kind of where I want to be. And within the draft, I guess after the draft, we went to some of the bars there, and that's where I'd found the Barstool guys. They were there.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
I did or didn't?
No, you mentioned that to me.
Yes, to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these guys with Barstool do a hockey podcast, and I knew they were going to be there. And that's when I was like, when I was in that moment was just kind of crazy, because I was like around all these guys that I'd look up to just with like podcast realm and stuff like that. And they were very inviting, and like there was no like security around them. Like they were all just like hanging out there. So I went up to them, got a picture with them. And then I talked to one of their producers who is not like, I was more curious on how he got his start. Cause I was like, a lot of the guys that are on the podcast either played in the NHL or were with Barstool.
They had some sort of affiliation with the sport.
Affiliation with the sport,
team, whatever it is.
And I didn't know what his background was. So I went up and asked him, and he's like, honestly, I don't know how I did it. Like, I emailed every person that I knew. And mind you, this guy, his name's Mike Grinnell, and he's, he lived in Boston, Massachusetts, where Barstool started. So he was there kind of early, or at least like knew of them before they're the national big company that they are now. And when I'd asked him, I was like, hey, like, can I pick your brain for a minute? And he was like, yeah, of course. So I asked him what he was doing, and he'd said that he was living in Boston and he'd known about Barstool, and he pretty much emailed just everyone in Barstool that he knew, their first name, last name, at barstoolsports.com, just trying to get anyone, and just was saying like, hey, I want a job, and gave his backstory. And then one of the guys who's on Spit and Chicklets, which is the Barstool podcast, reached back out to him. We're like, hey, we want to start a hockey podcast. We could use a producer if you have those skills. Like, we could see using you. Like, let's get together. And then they talked, and here he is now, 7 years later, that he's the producer for them. I'm talking to him, and it was just like very inspiring to hear that. And then he introduced me to some other guys that I had known in the hockey podcast world and recognized them at least. And then I was talking to them, and one of the guys, Johnny Lazarus, who I've actually had on my hockey podcast, we had him as a guest. Mm-hmm. And I just remember him saying, like, there was a lot of stuff, and obviously we were out at the bar, so I don't remember everything that we did.
Yeah.
But I do remember him saying to me that what was it? He had said, the only way the podcast is going to fail is if you give up. Anything other than that, like, it's up to you. Like, the only way it fails is if you stop trying.
Yeah.
And that like really kind of hit me, because at that point with the podcast, we were not doing anything at the moment. It had been maybe like a month since we had recorded, and I was kind of just frustrated with the whole process, and I don't know, just figuring out how to do it, because recording in that apartment was tough.
Yeah.
Super echoey, and we had a lot of issues. So
it almost got in the way in terms of, well, I'm sure you're probably thinking, like, if I'm here and this isn't fit right, then I can't do this, right? Like, that's typically the normal thought process, I feel like, would happen.
Yeah.
Situationally, you'd be like, well, I live in this apartment, I don't have the right gear, I don't have the right mics, this isn't going to work, I'm just not going to do this.
No, exactly. And that's how I felt when we just were all kind of getting, not burnt out, but just like dejected. We were like, each time we record this, like, it's just not
something happens.
Yeah. And then I was just like, maybe I just need to start something on my own without them, or something like that. Like, I don't know. I just need to do something, because I like doing this, but it's just every week I work so hard on this, and then the audio is all messed up or something like that. So anyways, he had told me that, and then they had actually all followed our Instagram, so they still follow us. And
really,
yeah. So I mean, we've always got eyes on them, and they always are seeing our stuff, which is cool and kind of a motivating thing.